Hi everyone, welcome to Mammalogy. We're going to go ahead and start with our first PowerPoint, which you can see on your screen. And we're going to look at the two words here. So you know the word mammal, which is the study of our classification, our grouping, and ology means the study of. So when we look at mammalian diversity, we want to understand that diversity is going to be based on classification. So classification really just simply means the grouping of anything. It could be the grouping of music, like you see in this particular example, the genre of alternate music, folk music, holiday music. So we group things based on certain characteristics. So how do we group things when we're talking about organisms? Well, we use the classification system. So you might be a little less familiar with the grouping called the order, but we'll go over the different names of the systems. 28 extant. Extant means living, that they're alive. Extinct, you might have heard of, means not living at this point in time, or examples, the dinosaurs are extinct. So we have 153 families of mammals, 1,230 genera. You might know that as genus. And 5,420 species. So all of these numbers, when we're looking at orders, families, those are probably pretty consistent in staying in those numbers. However, genre and species change as we find new organisms. We can add that to our listing of organisms. So these numbers are not constant, and they actually do change. And every time I do this PowerPoint, I do update current species number and genre. So what is classification? Again, it's a grouping system, but when we're talking about biology, it's a grouping based on similarities and or differences on anatomy. That's the main one, but now we even use DNA evidence. So how are they grouped? You might have heard of this if you took living environment. We have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family. No, it's cut off, but that's genus, species, and subspecies. Subspecies we'll be getting into later on as we talk about populations of mammals, and this really gets into conserving species. We find that there are populations that are geographically isolated, so they tend to only breed with the species that are found in their particular population group. So the common person would say, all of polar bears should be saved, but we find that different populations might be more vulnerable, and we really might need to focus more on a couple of populations than just generally broadly saying, all polar bears need to be saved. And the reason being behind that is that when we look at subspecies, they tend to have characteristics where they will only breed within their subspecies grouping based on like mating practices and behavior. So that's why we need to, if we want to conserve all of those in that particular species, that we look at all those subgroups. And again, I know I said quickly, but we'll actually be going more into diversity in subspecies when we talk about certain mammals that are extremely, on the critical endangered list. Okay, so why do we use it? It just helps us understand the natural environment a little bit more. And it also allows us to understand how they're similar, how they're different, and that can, allow us to make predictions based on that. So is 5,420 a lot? Hey, if you're talking about money, it definitely is a lot, right? But in the scheme of things, when we look at all the diversity in different organisms, you can see the numbers here, that it's probably really not many in comparison. And this is just amphibians, reptiles, birds, fish, plants. If we were talking about invertebrates, such as like insects, animals without backbones, we can find that their numbers are in the millions. And even bacteria, we don't even know how many there might be. So even though we only know probably about 10% of the diversity on the planet, 5,000 isn't a large number in diversity. Okay, so, there's the number for insects. So not impressed. I get it. You're a mammal, you want to be kind of the best of the best. So we're going to talk about, how mammals are really good if they're not represented by high diverse numbers. So Cenozoic, if you look at this timeline here, you can see that the Cenozoic is, I might not have it, is going to be a time where we're looking at, hard for me to see, sorry. The Cenozoic is right here, and we call that the age of the mammals. I believe that was about 200 million years ago when we look at the fossil record. So mammals are not necessarily the highest in diversity numbers when we compare them to other organisms on the planet, but definitely they're the most geographically widespread and the most morphologically. Morphology means how your body structure is set up. And they're the most morphologically diverse group of vertebrates. And it's really quite amazing how that happens, and we're going to explore why that happens. So let's just look at the largest range of body size. So we really take it for granted. We live in this world and you know, we might hear of different animals, but it's quite impressive that you have a grouping of animal where the smallest, in this case, the Etruscan shrew, which you can see right here, or the bumblebee bat, which you can see right here, it probably weighs only about 2 grams or the size of a penny. So they're quite small. So you got to imagine a mini heart, many arteries and capillaries and vessels pumping through these animals' bodies. And then you have the same, you know, basic system found in an elephant or in a blue whale. So it's quite impressive to see the same anatomy either enlarged or extremely small. So here we have the largest terrestrial animal, which is here represented as the African elephant. And of course, we're going to go into elephants. They tend to be a common interest for people. But this one's an African elephant, and the bull can actually be about 16,000, maybe even 18,000 pounds. And then even the largest ever vertebrate is a blue whale, which can actually weigh about 300,000 pounds. I'm not sure if anyone actually went out and weighed it, or statistically they just found out per body mass how much that animal weighs, but quite impressive. All right, so just a little bit of fun. I know you can't physically do it, but it's going to be on your worksheet, and you're going to predict which one you think is the largest animal. So go ahead and do that, write that down. Okay, and your options here, I know the names are a little hard here. I mean, you could even just call this like a flying dinosaur if you want. Brachiosaurus, not too bad. Giraffe, T-Rex, you can abbreviate. Here we have a person, and here we have a blue whale. Okay, so even just looking at those organisms, you can, you know, think maybe, okay, a dinosaur would be bigger, but we find out that actually, oops, sorry. I don't know if I can get this animation working here. I might not be able to. Let's see if we can do it here. Okay, here we go. All right, so obviously we can go ahead and circle that. Bear with me, this is my first time doing this, so I'm gonna be a little glitchy here. But hopefully as time progresses, it'll get a little bit easier. Okay, so here we have the largest animal. Easy thing to guess on an exam, right? And you, even if you didn't, couldn't read it, couldn't identify it, sorry, you can go ahead and read it right down here that it's quite large, right? So we always think dinosaurs are super large, and don't get me wrong, they definitely are, but definitely we wind up being the largest in the grouping of animals. All right, so let's just look at some of the animals and mammals really specifically here, how their habitats are quite different, and how they've adapted to it is something we're going to be focusing on. So when we talk about some common terms, I'm going to be focusing on explaining those. That's definitely why you want to listen to the PowerPoint, and you don't want to just go ahead and read it. Because you might be a little confused on some of the vocabulary, and you'll be responsible for understanding that vocabulary. So terrestrial, if you haven't heard, and I don't know if I can write this, so I don't know if you want to add this, terrestrial is going to be, well, this is torturous, land, okay? So hopefully you can just verbally listen and then write that down, because I think that's going to be one of your definitions that you need to define. And again, you're more than welcome to use Google search, internet search. Arboreal is already written for you, and that means in trees, so they live in trees. Okay, so obviously we have our llamas and our wolves, our kangaroos. They're going to be, all of these, the monkey, and the rodent are all going to be terrestrial. However, we might want to specify, not only are they living on the land, but more specifically in the canopies or the trees, which would be arboreal. Okay. All right, and then even fascinating is that we have mammals, in the air. And we'll be talking about bats, and we have this unusual animal right here, which I kind of clicked a little quick. We'll definitely have a whole unit on bats, so don't worry. And we look at these guys. These are actually subterranean. Subterranean is also defined for you. It means under the ground. Okay, and if you can't find his eyes, they are here, up here, probably hidden. And we'll talk about even some moles. They'll get some famous lecture period here, or I should say, now I'm forgetting, not rodentia, but this grouping of animal. So star moles are going to be have these large finger-like projections, and that's going to be allow them to actually smell and feel. And they're quite interesting. We'll talk about them later on too. All right, and then we have some of our elephant seals here. These are two males, they're fighting. There's definitely some blood there on the neck. They usually don't kill each other. They can die of some of the wounds and interactions, but usually one, smart enough to give up, and then the other one that wins has a right to mate. But anyway, going back into our understanding of where we find mammals, we even find them, in the water, which is aquatic. All right, or we can even say they're truly aquatic. We have whales, obviously dolphins, and they're going to be completely submerged in the water full time, where you have your other animals that are going to be spending part of their life cycle on land and part in the ocean, where they breed on the land and then they spend most of their feeding time, well, actually hold their feeding time in the ocean. Okay. All right, so here's some trivia. True or false? Mammals evolved before the dinosaurs. So what do you think? Make your prediction. Again, you can't get it wrong because you're going to hear the answer sooner or later, but just try. All right, these trivia questions are always, a little biased. They always want you to think, that can't be true, but in reality it is. All right, so let's look at this cladistics. Here we have our Cenozoic, right? That's what I talked about, the age of the mammals. Here it's actually quoted as 70 million years, and I apologize, I did say 200 million years ago. That's Triassic. So really what I meant by that is that we actually see the first mammal in this grouping, actually probably even the Permian. Let me go back before I state myself. Here we have they found, and they're going back down here, but the last fossil record that I read was about 260 million years. So really, I guess what they're saying here is they're assuming there's some sort of ancestor since the fossil they found was 260 million years old. So I was wrong in saying that Cenozoic was that far. Really, in the past 50 million or 70 million years, we see the expansion of mammals. But when we see the first mammal, which is what I was trying to get at, is that we really see it about 250 to 260 million years ago based on the fossil record. Okay, so now that I clarified that, and we're going to be going all into the evolution too, so you'll be guided through that as well. So here we have our Cenozoic, which is 50 million years. You can see right here you have your Mammalia grouping, right? Your reptiles and aves. Aves means birds, and amphibia, which is amphibians. And here you can see right around the Carboniferous period, Devonian is the age of the fishes. So right around here is where you see the branching off of all tetrapods, right? Tetrapods are four-limbed animals. And so when we say that mammals are related to reptiles and birds or amphibians, if you think about it, they all do have similarities in their body structure. They're bilateral, they have four limbs. And again, we'll be going to the evolution, and that makes sense because we all have a common ancestor, right? So if we look at our dinosaurs, we see our Mesozoic, our Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous. We can see that our dinosaurs are going to be in this time zone. And you can find that mammals are actually coexisting with them, and even probably evolved about the same time. So it wasn't really until the dinosaurs went extinct that we see a huge expansion in mammals. Okay, so circle where mammals first evolve. Okay, so again, you can print out the PowerPoint if you choose. Maybe you want to make a note of this. And I think there'll be a question on your worksheet page where mammals first evolved. So if you can't circle it, but you can go ahead and, sorry about that. You can list like right around here. So give yourself a time period. Okay, so go ahead and write that down. Carboniferous, 350 to 207 million years. That's when mammals first evolved, right? And then it says make a box around the greatest diversity. So yeah, mammals are quite ancient, but we only find their diversity really expanding in the Cenozoic, which is considered the age of the mammals. Okay. So what makes it a mammal? There's lots of things. A lot of it is defined as hair. But when people look at dolphins or whales, they don't really have hair. They might have bristles or whiskers or something along those lines. But if you had to pick one, like definitely all mammals have, is they produce milk to feed young. How they give that milk is a little different. But mammals are the only ones that are considered lactogenic. Lactogenic means produce milk to feed young. All right, so they have modified sweat glands, which I know sounds gross, that actually manufacture milk, which is not the same for each species. It's a different protein or fat content, depending on the mammal and the mammal's requirements for growth. Viviparous means live birth. There's a little asterisk because there's exceptions to that one. Can you guess who it is? Who cannot give live birth, and it's a mammal. You might have read it on a sample cap. If you guessed platypus, you are correct. They actually lay an egg. But all other mammals, besides the platypus and the echidna, actually are the only ones that lay eggs that are mammals. All other mammals besides those two are going to have live birth. Hirsute means the epidermis, which is the outer layer of the skin. Dermis is the inner layer, and epidermis means that physically is going to have hair. The dermis is actually where the hair follicle is found, but the epidermis is the outer part, which is where you can physically see the hair piece. Okay, hair or fur. Right, and there's exceptions to that asterisk. Whales and dolphins don't have hair, but some of them actually do have hair follicles. And if you look at certain whales, they do have like bristles around their mouth area, which is like a type of hair. Endothermic homeothermy, that's really fancy terminology. That really means that you can keep your body temperature warm no matter what the outside temp is, right? And that, of course, means that you have within reason, right? I mean, you stick someone in the polar regions without any, warm jacket and pants, they're not going to be able to maintain their body temperature. So each animal is adapted to its environment, but for the most part, if it's in its right environment, it's able to maintain the right body temperature. So there are, tropical animals, there are polar animals, and each animal is adapted equally to its own environment. But when it is adapted to its environment, it's able to regulate its own body temperature, right, to a stable level, right? So like when we take your temperature for corona, we want you to be around 98.6 plus or minus 1 degree. Okay, there we go. We had a little bit of freeze. All right, so we have also very common jaw structures, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it allows animals to eat different types of food very effectively. And if you look at the picture right here, you can actually see that the reptile is going to be made up of multiple bones. So here you have bone number 1, bone number 2, bone number 3, and then bone number 4. They all have fancy names. We don't need to get into that. But all of these are going to comprise the jaw structure. So believe it or not, the mammal wins out in jaw strength. Now, I'm not saying you're going to want to stick your hand in a crocodile's mouth and it's not going to hurt. They definitely have adaptations like muscles to make it snap quickly, and that's going to give them great bite pressure. But when we look at mammals, they have this large area of bone that allows for muscle attachment right along here, and that's going to happen to the right to the top part of the skull. So if you have the top part of the skull, right, with the eye, this muscle is going to attach to it. Whoops. The wrong button. But either way, you get it. So stronger jaw structure means that it's going to allow for a greater bite strength and also allow you to chew your food properly, right? Well, it might have been yelled at when you were young for this one, but when you're chewing, you're allowing that action to grind your food, and that's possible by this muscle attachment right here, where as a reptile, if you have ever watched reptile eat, or you saw a video of it, they actually just bite their prey and then they just swallow it because they don't have that muscle attachment. It's more of like a snap jaw, where ours can use that greater muscle attachment for coordination and chewing our food. All right. Then we have improved hearing, which I'm not saying reptiles can't hear very well, but we have something, we have 3 ear bones. They're called ear ossicles. The bones are cartilage, and they do have three separate names: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. And here you can see right over here, okay, that these are actually these are the 3 the 3 ear bones, which are part of, believe it or not, actually come from here. So these 3 bones, I know it's a little bit of a stretch. You're not going to believe me right now. We're going to watch a video on it. So what we see in anatomy is actually things don't usually disappear. They usually move around. So these 3 wind up becoming the ear bones themselves. And you can see that coloration here and how it's changing. So that allows you to hear a little bit more closely, and to hear in like a 3D in a 3D fashion. All right, so then the other part is something called a secondary hard palate. This is going to allow us to, it seems strange because when we think of animals, and I'll show you on the next slide, it's a little bit more easily seen. If you want to feel your hard palate of your mouth, take your tongue and push it at the top of your roof of your mouth, right? That's the hard palate. If you push a little bit further back, your tongue, right? That's actually your smooth palate. And there's no bone there. It's just like soft tissue. But again, that's your separation between your nose, your nasal cavity, and your mouth. So you have this separation behind here, right? That's going to allow you to separate your breathing from your mouth. So you can basically chew your food, right, and breathe at the same time. And that doesn't sound very fancy, but it's a huge evolutionary jump. Where animals can now take more, I guess, nutritionally poor foods like grasses and things like that, and go ahead and get more nutrients out of them because they're able to grind them up and then swallow them, where reptiles are just going to eat their food quite quickly and swallow it. And so really very little mechanical digestion is happening. Same thing with birds, although birds can rip and tear. I think reptiles can as well, but they're not going to get the same nutrient amount from nutrient poor foods at doing that. So that's a huge evolutionary jump. Also, it allows for drinking of milk, which the baby can now drink the milk and suckle, right? And then also breathe at the same time, right? The other thing is we also have specialized teeth in mammals. And here you can see reptiles really just have these sharp projections, and mammals have this evolutionary adaptation where they're able to eat, whether it be carnivorous or herbivore, eating plants. They have specialized teeth in order to consume their food, and again, extract more nutrients from that. So here it is. I'm going to ask this question as well. Why would it be better to have a hard palate separating the mouth and nose? So this will definitely be a test question, so it'll be easy. And that's the whole goal of this worksheet, is for you to answer some questions that'll pop up on your exam. Everything is open notes, so you'll be able to go ahead and just access either the PowerPoint, which might be a little more, labor intensive, or you can just look at your papers that you're doing now, and those will be where your test questions will be found. So bear with me. And again, this whole PowerPoint is meant to be watched for the entire week. So if you want to break it up, you definitely can. So why would it be better to have a hard palate separating the mouth? Okay, so here we have our lizard. And if you notice right here, there's the tongue, okay? There's the nose, there's the mouth. And what you can actually see is that it's, there's no separation. So if you're eating, you can't breathe at the same time. So you just have to swallow your food quickly. So reptiles and even birds don't have that separation, will actually just swallow their food. And most of the digestion will take place in the stomach. Here you have that separation, that hard palate. Here's your soft palate. You can feel that if you can reach your tongue a little bit further back. And this is really important because it allows you to breathe while you're chewing your food, right? So that's why it's better to have a hard palate, so you can chew your food, right? Although sometimes when the food's really good, you don't want to, you just want to eat it, you want to gulp it down, right? But we all know we have to chew our food properly in order to get the right nutrients. All right, so these are some other examples. We're going to go over these a little bit more quickly. Oops, not that quick. And these are going to be, we all have the same grouping of vertebral columns. So we have our cervical, our thoracic, I think I'm missing this one on here, the sacral. Oh, I'm sorry, it's right here, the sacrum. Sacral is singular, sacrum is plural, and our lumbar system, which here is called caudal. But either way, we have our, here, I'm sorry, there's only 4, and here there's listed 5. But either way, we have these vertebrae, and even almost in all mammals, the same amount of vertebrae. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think there's a couple mammals with one less or one more. Even giraffes have the same amount of vertebrae that, let's say, a whale has or a human. So even though they have those really, really long necks, right? So their vertebrae are still the same amount, but just obviously a lot larger. And again, the vertebrae allow for movement, whether it be a bipedal animal like us or a quadrupedal animal that's running or even swimming, right? It allows for flexion and movement. Double occipital condyles, those are going to be at the back of the skull, sorry. And really what it does is it allows you to kind of move your head around like this, push your head all the way around, because honestly, your neck and your skull are not joined by bone. They're only joined by muscle. So the double occipital condyles are literally just circles inside the back of your skull, which allow you to have a muscle attachment that allows you to roll your head around a movement. We take that for granted, but if you look at birds or if you look at reptiles, a lot of times they'll jerk their head funny, and that's just because they don't have that bone that allows them to roll their head around and move it up and down. We know that birds can kind of move their head back and forth and up and down, but it's not as coordinated. We only have thoracic ribs, so thoracic ribs are going to be the top part of your ribs. All right, so thoracic means your top part. I don't know if you can see me. Your top part, right? And abdominal. Okay, abdominal is going to be your belly area. Okay, so if you think about it, that doesn't sound like a good idea, because if you don't have abdominal ribs, you get hit, you're done for. And all reptiles have abdominal ribs. So you would think that you'd want to protect your intestines, your gut, and whatnot. But only having thoracic ribs allows you to touch your feet. Allows you to bend down, right? If you had ribs there, it would be really hard to do. So you also have a lighter skeleton, more flexible, and this also allows for mammals to have all different types of adaptations, whether it be swimming, whether it be flying, and not having those abdominal ribs, okay? So you kind of sacrifice a little bit of protection for flexibility. Vertebrae, again, it allows for flexion and extension and torque. And we'll be going that into different diversity of animals. General trends to decrease complexity and number of bones. You think more bones are better, but less energy is required to maintain that bone structure. It's lighter, and it allows, again, for more diversity. And that's why we see mammals in so many different forms, whether they be swimming or jumping or again, we'll see that through the diversity, how that decrease is allowed for so much more diversity. So how do mammals broken up? Again, we have all 4-chambered hearts. This improves for increase in, and other animals do too, but this is, all mammals have this. And you need that in order to get such high output. We all have anucleated red blood cells, meaning that we have no nucleus. A means without. So we have no nucleus inside of our red blood cells. And there's actually a lot of animals that do have that, like insects will actually have a nucleus in their blood cells. And that's just because they don't really need as high of an oxygen requirement. We're constantly utilizing a lot more energy, which is why we have a large concentration of mitochondria, because we have a really higher metabolic rate. So we really burn a lot of calories in comparison to other animals. Like, that's why if you have a pet dog, you can feed them you have to feed them maybe 2 times a day or maybe 3 times a day. But if you have a pet snake, you only have to feed them once a week. So think about that in terms of, energy. We definitely, use up a lot more energy. And again, that's based on our activity and what we're doing. Large complex lungs, muscular diaphragm. That's going to allow you to, be able to run, to move. Again, if you're a whale, that's going to allow you to hold your breath, and even enhance breathing, like holding your breath, for long periods of time. Masseter muscles is what I was talking about. That's those muscles that are attached. And it's new in comparison to evolutionary terms. So reptiles don't have it, and it's jaw movement. So it allows your jaw to chew, right? To chew your food properly. And like we said, reptiles and birds don't do that. Sweat and sebaceous gland aid in thermoregulation, which is really important. That was not what I expected. Sorry. Very sensitive. Sweat and sebaceous glands are allowing you to cool yourself down, which is essential if you're living in hot environments, right? So humans and horses have sweat glands around their entire body because we're supposed to be living in warmer environments. And so we're able to sweat more profusely and keep our body temperature cooler than other animals. A large neopallium is really your the frontal part of your brain. Really, it's more like all the way over here too. So that's going to allow you for thinking and processing information, which is really important because you're going to. We find that mammals are usually very social animals, and they need a lot more brain processing power to comprehend more of their environment. So they have bigger brains. All right, so sustained energy production. We find that they need a lot of energy. There's like cheetah, that poor gazelle, that's probably being chased by some sort of cheetah or lion. And you need endothermic homeothermy to maintain that high body temperature, which gives you that high level activity, right? So if you are going to react, you're going to be able to sustain that energy for longer periods of time. Whereas if you're a reptile, you're really going to be dependent on the environment for that change, for that energy level, right? So like if you're a reptile in cooler environment, it doesn't matter if that cheetah's chasing you, you're going to be food. Whereas the gazelle can maintain that run for a lot longer period of time because it's going to be an internal piece through the mitochondria and sustaining that body. And that high level of activity through an internal combustion engine, which is the good old mitochondria. So a quick dash of animals we're going to be talking about. The extant, again, which are the living ones. We really won't be spending much time on mammals that are extinct, except for when we talk about the evolution of mammals. So we'll be talking about monotremes. After we talk about evolution of mammals, we'll talk about monotremes that come first. So that's the echidna, right here, a spiny anteater. Here's a spiny anteater. They're from Australia. Here's your platypus, which we talked about before. There's only 2 families and 5 species as well, so there's not too many of them. We're going to talk about marsupials. Marsupials we're familiar with here in North America is the opossum. And there's 3 orders, 3 families, 21 species. But most of the marsupials are in South America. So we'll talk about those. And Australia. Good old Australia has our major marsupials as well. So when we're talking about marsupials, we'll be focusing on these 2 countries. Cute animals, right? We got our koala, we have our Tasmanian devil, we have our bandicoot, our wombat, our kangaroo. Okay, Afrosoricidae. It's a mouthful to say. These are our golden moles, which is this guy right here, our tenrec right here, and then our Macrosolidae, which is our elephant shrew. Not too many families, and they're ancient mammals, meaning we find them early on in the fossil record. So they look kind of strange to us, but they've been around for quite some time. We don't talk too much about these guys, the aardvark, but I don't know why. I think it's just because there's only one family, one species, but there's going to be an opportunity where you can do some research. So some of the mammals we don't get to, you can more than welcome to do some research on them and present them in your final project. We have our hyrax, which is Hericidae, our elephants, which are Proboscideae. We're going to be talking about dugongs and manatees, armadillos, okay, Scandentias, Dimopteras. Primates we spend some time on. Rodentia we do spend some time on. It's a naked mole rat. Yes, they're real. Some people are kind of surprised to see that. They think they're fake, I guess. Lagomorpha, rabbits and pikas. That's a pika right down there. Sounds like Pikachu, which maybe it might be. They are found in Asia. So, Saurosamorpha, which are shrews, moles, and solenodons. And I actually think I had that misrepresented in the subterranean one. I think I said it was rodentia, which it's not. Chiroptera, we're going to spend a whole unit on, which are bats. Pangolins, which I love. They're one of my favorite mammals. They don't look like mammals, they look like reptiles. They're very rare, critically endangered, and they're found in Asia. So not too much is known about them since they're, a hidden species that we don't come in contact with too much. Carnivores to spend some time on. They tend to be a really common favorite for most people. Parasodaclea are horses, are rhinos, are tapirs. Okay, these are odd-toed mammals. So they have one hoof, three hooves, which you can see the rhino has three right there. So they're odd-hooved animals. Artiodactyls are even-toed animals. Now I'm saying it right, and they usually have 2 or 4 hooves. Cetaceans are whales, dolphins, and porpoises, and we'll be talking about them. Okay, ignore that one. I had that already set for you because this was a partner work. All right. Thank you so much. Any questions? I'll meet you again when we have our extra help time.